Okay, so I've been hemming and hawing over this for about 2 months now. I think it's finally time I address the Sword and Shield controversy. Hey guys, Zack here, and I want to talk to you guys about Pokemon Sword and Shield. So, if you guys don't know, Pokemon Sword and Shield are the next Pokemon games that are going to be coming out later this year, and they were released in full during the E3 presentation and were shown off in full during E3, and people started getting to see demos. However, during that demo period, the Game Freak employees, specifically Masuda, have addressed the fact that they're deciding to stop focusing on the national decks from this period onward, and that games going forward are only going to have the regional decks. Now, this isn't much of a problem, but it has led to a lot of people getting more and more salty with each passing day, to the point where it's now 2 months in and people have begun harassing Masuda on his personal account and have started harassing every single post that comes out for Pokemon, be it either on the channel or on their Twitter, and have basically called out every single concern that Game Freak has addressed by calling them liars and idiots and things like that, and people have gotten really aggressive. So I figured I would do a kind of flip of the reverse of people who have joined the bandwagon and decided to boycott Sword and Shield, and do the opposite. I decided I would discuss if Pokemon Sword and Shield is actually going to be bad, and what's good and what's bad about it going forward. So the main concern people have is that Pokemon Sword and Shield isn't going to be good because it's missing the national decks and has cut content, and supposedly Game Freak has been doing this for years. But the fact of the matter is that Game Freak is first and foremost a company. They throw things at the wall and see what sticks, and modify and change what doesn't. So in addition to that, they've also given each region its own specific gimmick. For example, Generation 4 had the Sinnoh Underground, Generation 3 had Pokemon contests and secret bases, Gen 5 had an overarching changing overworld that would change with the seasons, and Gen 6 had Mega Evolutions, Gen 7 had Z moves, and so on and so forth for all the different generations there have been of Pokemon. So that part is what makes me a little bit confused, because yeah, they have removed features, but they've been features that have been specific to that particular region, and when that region comes along again, they bring those features back. So it kind of boggles the mind as to why people are complaining about that specifically. One thing people have complained about, though, is that apparently they have cut the, what is it called, Safari Zone, but I know for a fact that they haven't. It's been in all but 2 regions, those regions being Unova and Alola, the two regions that didn't really have a place for one. And people have also complained that the main reason people are cutting the people at Game Freak are cutting the national decks is because of their new Project Town, which is coming out at some point, we don't know. But people have complained that the main reason that Sword and Shield are inferior is because people have been complaining about Town, and how Town is going to drag away development time from Sword and Shield. But the thing is, Game Freak has released side projects on their own alongside Pokemon games before, and they've been successful, and so have the games that have come out around those times. So the fact that Town is being developed at the same time has nothing really to do with it, though I think people are just upset about the national decks being cut, and Town kind of got dragged into the crossfire of that. So it kind of got dragged in without it actually having any real bearing on the Sword and Shield controversy. But another thing people have also discussed is that every Pokemon is somebody's favorite, but there are some that really aren't. For example, Bominable is controversial in itself, because Bominable is a Pokemon that is designed to be this really frail sweeper, and it doesn't look the most appealing. It kind of looks like a crab that grew hair, and it makes sense that a crab that with hair isn't something that you would find in nature, and it does look kind of ugly to begin with. So it makes sense that the woolly crab Pokemon would look a bit off, but who knows? But anyway, I haven't really found many people who like Bominable. I think it's like me and one other person that I know of that actually like Bominable. So Bominable isn't really that well liked a Pokemon, or at least I haven't found many people who have voiced their opinions on whether Bominable is good or not. But yeah, not every Pokemon is somebody's favorite. There are, in fact, Pokemon that nobody likes. And Simisear, in particular, is a Pokemon that absolutely no one likes and is, in fact, the least popular Pokemon of all time. So nobody really likes Simisear. But a lot of people are complaining, well, they can't count the National Dex because every Pokemon is somebody's favorite. No. There are Pokemon people don't really like all too much, and nobody will really bat an eye if they were disappeared. And people have also pointed out that's maybe because the National Dex has been cut that they're not going to have as many Pokemon this time around, but I think there's been concerns otherwise, and people have pointed out that the National Dex will probably, because it's been cut, that the Regional Dex will probably be bigger to compensate. So who really knows there? I'm pretty sure it'll be bigger to compensate, and there are going to be quite a few Pokemon, probably a couple hundred or so, because there are over 1,000 Pokemon at this point, including form changes and form differences, and it can be kind of hard to figure out which Pokemon you can use the best. And some people have brought up concerns because because Game Freak has finally decided to kind of try and balance Pokemon a bit more now, because they realize that with over 1,000 plus Pokemon, there's really not much they can do in the way of balancing, because the way balancing in Pokemon works is that every Pokemon has set stat distributions, and that some Pokemon are inherently better than others, but for the most part, any Pokemon can be good provided you know a good set for it. For example, pretty much any Pokemon except Leedian is good, because nobody likes Leedian. Nobody will ever like Leedian. Leedian is kind of garbage. But any other Pokemon besides Leedian can be good, because you can get some interesting ideas with move setups and stuff like that. For example, you can take Love Disc, put status moves on it, and it'll pretty much outspeed everything every single time and shut down any potential threats, and then switch out as a suicide lead and go into a more powerful attacker to finish the job. So yeah, Love Disc can be good under the right circumstances. You do need to set up some status moves on it though, because it really doesn't have much in the way of attack stats. So all you can really do is status a Pokemon to death, which is kind of hard to do. But people have complained that Game Freak can't really balance anything, and that there are outside forces that actually balance it. For example, Smogon is the most popular one, but to be honest, Smogon's balancing tiers are kind of based on how frequently a Pokemon is used, rather than if they're actually good or not. There's like 3 or 4 tiers that are actually based on if a Pokemon is really good or really bad, and that's about it. Every other tier is based on how frequently the Pokemon gets used. From NU, meaning never used, to OU being overused. But for the most part, there aren't that many Pokemon outside of it that are terrible. Some have specific sets you need to run on them to make them good, but for the most part, no Pokemon except the legendaries are really broken. And then there's Mega Evolutions, which are inherently broken because of how they work, but they're going to be removing Mega Evolutions, even though they've lasted for the past generation, because reasons people complained with that they weren't really in Pokemon all that well, but people have been complaining nonetheless, because they want Pokemon to be the best that it can ever be. And because of that, people have started to drag down Pokemon Sword and Shield's quality as a result. Because people are still upset about the National Dex, and that's mainly where all their anger is coming from. But there are people who have complained about how Sword and Shield is kind of the worst Pokemon game ever because it has really bad graphics. And honestly, I don't see it. I mean, it's probably a taste of personal preference and it's based on that, but I really don't see a problem with Sword and Shield's graphics. I mean, yeah, they reuse animations a lot, but the thing about animations is that it doesn't really matter. Unless you're actively looking for them and nitpicking the games to death, which a lot of these people are, it's really not going to matter too much in the long run. It's like, oh, well, everybody should have their own personal animations, yada, 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 but it's not really that important at all. But a lot of people have been just complaining in general about Sword and Shield, and honestly, I don't see too many problems with Sword and Shield. I mean, yeah, the National Dex got cut, and that sucks, but there are quite a few legitimate reasons that the National Dex should have been cut. The case in point, Game Freak has stated several times that there's a lot of Pokemon now, and they can't indefinitely support them all. And they have mentioned that. People say that Game Freak doesn't care, but if they didn't care, they wouldn't have released an official statement on the Pokemon website saying why they're doing what they're doing. And I think people are just being, well, I don't want to say the word, but for lack of a better term, they're being kind of entitled. So, yeah, the Pokemon community has been bad for a while, and people have constantly been bashing each other for a while. But it was because of Sword and Shield that everybody started to see just how bad the Pokemon community has become. To the point where people are now hostilely debating in the comments, and people have started to constantly badger each other about how they're wrong or they're right or whatever. But the point is, people have just been hitting each other over the head about which side is right, and it's just escalated in the past 2 months to the point where people are just the worst. They're just badgering each other about how your facts are wrong. No, your facts are wrong. No, you're both wrong. But anyway, people have just been complaining constantly, nonstop, for the past 2 months. And I finally just had enough of it and decided to make this video. Because it really doesn't matter. It's not that big a deal. Yeah, the National Dex got cut. So what? There are like 1,000 Pokemon at this point. Do you really expect Game Freak to indefinitely support them all? I mean, yeah, some people do like more different Pokemon over others due to popularity and stuff like that. But for the most part, there are Pokemon that just don't need to be there. I mean, is anybody really going to miss some of the legendaries and mythicals? I mean, yeah, we had all the legendaries and mythicals in the last generation. I don't think anybody's going to really miss them all too much in this one. But the thing is, Game Freak has a habit of kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, trying to balance Pokemon and having it blow up in their face. They've been improving different Pokemon over the course of the past generation or so, trying to make them better. But the thing is that they also introduced the legendaries, and then people just use the legendaries and the same Pokemon they've always used anyway, because the National Dex was still a thing at that point. And people have just continued to just bring in the same Pokemon they always use all the time, regardless of how balanced the Pokemon company has tried to make Pokemon. So the competitive scene is kind of a mess because people just constantly bring in the same 6 Pokemon that they always use over and over with no real change. So Game Freak has tried to balance it, and nobody really cared. And so people have just been, so now people are complaining about the National Dex being cut, even though the National Dex would make the competitive pool smaller so that Game Freak can actually make the Pokemon shine. How is this a problem? I mean, yeah, Game Freak have introduced Pokemon that are a bit too overpowered. For example, Ultra Necrozma, my favorite legendary and my favorite Pokemon in general, is basically a walking encyclopedia of all the different mechanics that Game Freak has introduced over the past 7 generations, and is one of the coolest Pokemon designs I have seen to date. But it's kind of broken because it has really powerful attack and special attack, And it has an ability that makes super effective attacks hit double, or at least twice as hard. So, I can understand people complaining about how there's a balancing issue, but there were quite a few Pokemon that are balanced in Generation 7, and they have tried to keep it balanced in Generation 7 by introducing Pokemon that can do certain things better than others, but for the most part are all kind of on equal footing in terms of what they can do. For example, you can see, as I explained, Love Disc. It can be a really good status sweeper, but nobody ever uses it because people only really see it as a means to get hard scales. And to be honest, that is what it is, but it can be useful if you know how to set it up. But the main thing is that people have just been badgering Game Freak for about 2 months because the National Dex got cut, and they continue to bring Game Freak's name through the mud as they try to prove every single thing that is wrong with these games. But it doesn't matter. People just need to form their own opinions, and I understand that some people are just like blinded by their hatred and just want to spout nonsense for the sake of spouting nonsense. And people have continued to just ignore the fact that Game Freak has stated multiple times that they're trying to fix things. For example, they had a problem importing the models from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon into Sword and Shield, so they had to change them just a little bit and make new ones from scratch, and people have just been like, oh, Game Freak's lying, they didn't make new models, look, I can show you. No, you can't prove a negative. You can't prove that they didn't make the models, but you can certainly prove that they did. Because you can look at the models and see that they actually did recreate them from scratch, and it's impossible to tell the difference, because nobody can really prove otherwise. They can't prove that they were made from scratch, except that for Game Freak having given everybody their word that they did, and you can't disprove it despite everybody wanting to. And the thing about Sword and Shield is that they're going to be adding new ideas that they've expanded on in previous generations. For example, Dynamaxing. It's essentially supposed to combine Mega Evolution and Z moves so that it's a lot more balanced, because at this point they were two separate things and you couldn't run one or the other, and you could only use one each, and not all Pokemon had access to them. But now with Dynamaxing you actually can use both at once, and that's what's amazing to me. Because it works. It's a good idea for a concept, but people are just like, it's gonna be broken. And then they introduced Gigantamaxing, which is a similar thing, but it actually does have like specific Z move type effects. But people are like, oh, it's broken because this, and this. No, it's really not, because the three Gigantamax Pokemon we've seen so far have been kind of counteracting each other. For example, we've gotten Dynamax Dreadnought, which is designed to set out stones with its move G-Max Stone Surge. Then you have Corviknight, which has its own G-Max move that removes status effects from the field. And you have Gigantamax Alcremie, which is supposed to deal damage and then heal all the Pokemon in the party. And then they only last for 3 turns. How is that broken? I don't really understand how that's broken. And they have it, and Game Freak has done what they said they're going to do with fixing balancing issues. Because they introduced a Pokemon, they introduced the Pumpkaboo line, which is known for being bred for competitive by having 4 different forms with 4 different stat distributions into the games. And that's really cool, because that means that people can pick what kind of Pumpkaboo they want, trade it, evolve it into Gourgeist, and have a competitive Gourgeist that they can actually use. I don't see a problem with that. But regardless of what people think, people are just going to continue to complain until they get their way. But Game Freak just isn't going to listen, because they know that people are just complaining for the sake of complaining, and they've given their stance on what they're actually doing and explained why they're doing it, and people have continued to complain, even though Game Freak has explained multiple times why they're doing it. So it really just comes down to people just needing to accept the fact that Game Freak is doing what they want to do for their vision of the games, and they want to make Pokemon better, because they know that people have been because they know that people just want the best games that they can possibly have, but people just continue to complain, spamming the same bring back National Dex hashtag and all that. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. I think the main thing is that people just want every feature in a Pokemon game to be in one single Pokemon game, and I don't think that's ever going to happen unless you're playing like a fan game like Pokemon Azurite, which I might play on the channel at some point if it ever comes out. But for the most part, they're just gonna try and keep the features separate so that it makes them special, and they're trying to separate up the Pokemon so that they're special as well. And I think people just need to accept that that's what Game Freak's vision for Pokemon is. I mean, yeah, the National Dex got cut, but it's not a big deal. And I think people just need to accept that and move on. But they're not going to move on. Although, if there is one thing that did positive that did come out of this, it's that people have created some pretty fantastic memes. So, anyway, if you guys do think that Sword and Shield will be good games, then be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Either way. But anyway, if you guys do think Sword and Shield will be good, then be sure to leave a like and leave me a comment saying why you think it's going to be good, or you can leave a dislike and complain like you think I'm going to change anything. But anyway, I mean, likes and dislikes basically count as the same thing, so either way, I win. But anyway, yeah. If I think that Sword and Shield will probably be good, who knows? But for right now, I'm just gonna wait until the games come out before I make a full judgment on what they are and how they work. So if you guys do want to judge the games on their own merits, wait till they come out and see how they play out. But anyway, if you guys want to see if you guys want to play the games for yourself and see and come to your own conclusions based on how they're going to work, then be sure to definitely check them out, because I think Sword and Shield are going to be good, but I really don't know because the games aren't out yet. They're still being finished and finalized for November. And people just continuously complain, and I think that people just need to give them a chance regardless of whether they think they're going to be bad or not. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy my opinions on Sword and Shield and want to let me know what you guys think of them, then be sure to leave me a like and comment. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter in the description below, and message me there if you guys have any opinions. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!